everybody. Welcome to Muscle Maven Radio. I'm your host, Ashley Van Houten. Thank you so much for being here with me. You are going to learn a lot in today's podcast. This one is good for anybody who is looking to optimize their training, any coaches, people especially who work with women. I'm going to get into that a little bit more in a minute. But first, before we go any further, I want to read a review of the podcast by somebody who is very awesome. And so I wanted to give them a shout out. This is from Snow Globe Trekker. And they say, I listened to Ashley giving an interview on another podcast and knew immediately that she was my kind of people. I subscribed that day and caught up on her podcast. What I love is her transparency and candor about the health and wellness environment. She's not pushing any agenda, except for maybe organ meats. I just added that editor's note. She simply wants to get us the best information. Her humor and kindness and her guests who are super supportive, super informative, and enjoyable. Ashley truly feels like you're listening to one of your girlfriends or gym buddies giving you a pep talk, which is exactly what I have needed this year. I love that so much. Thank you so much for that. That's exactly what I'm trying to do. So I'm really glad that that's resonating with you. That's what I want to do. I don't want to be dogmatic. I want to be honest. I want to be transparent. I want people to know that we don't all have it figured out. Nobody has it figured out. And the purpose is the journey. It's the learning and trying things and figuring things out and trying to be just a better, healthier version of you every day. So thank you so much for writing that review. It means a lot to me. I would love to send you a copy of my book if you'd like it. Or my other giveaway is a free copy of my pull-up program PDF. And that's another thing I wanted to tell you guys before we dive into today's podcast. Anybody who follows me on social media knows that I recently launched a back strength, functional upper body strength pull-up program. Super specific, maybe, but I know that it's a goal that a lot of people have. I know that it is a very technical, tough movement that not a lot of people can do or do properly, and pull-ups are kind of my thing. So I spent a couple years putting together a program, and I finally launched it a few months ago, and it is currently a web-based program that you kind of log into and you get your workouts, you get notifications from me, you get the whole video library of all of the movements, the accessory movements and exercises, how to perform the movements properly, all that good stuff. And you get access to me in the online portal so you can ask me questions and troubleshoot some things with me. But I did hear that folks wanted possibly a little bit more cost-effective and basic version of the program. So they just wanted a PDF. They don't necessarily want to have to log in. They don't necessarily need to talk to me. They just want the program so that they can go to the gym, hit the ground running, and start crushing some pull-ups. So I listened to that and I made a PDF. So the online version of the program is $49.99, still a very good deal, I think. But the PDF version is only $34.99. And it's simple. It has everything you need. It has the workouts. It has the benchmarks. It has the video library. You just don't get any reminders and personal one-on-one chats with me. So if you are interested in that program, send me an email, message me on Instagram at The Muscle Maven. All of my information is in my show notes. And pick yourself up the Jacked Back Pull-Up program because it's awesome. And I love seeing people getting pull-ups. But back to this awesome reviewer. You want a book? You want the pull-up program? Whatever you want, send me an email. Let me know that it was you who left the review. And I'll get you your treat because you deserve it. Okay, on to today's guest. Her name is Kayla Mulvogue. She is a physiotherapist. She is a professional, awesome worker-outer and smart person. And she, if you follow her on social media, she does a really good job of showing you optimized movements and workouts in the gym. And maybe one of the things I like following her for is like instead of doing this exercise, do this exercise, which I really like because she has the kind of physiology understanding behind it to show here's why this movement may be more effective. It may be hitting the muscle you're actually trying to hit, all of that stuff. But she also just launched a course called Applied Women's Physiology and Training. And it's a really comprehensive course all about women's physiology and how to apply that to your training, women's health. She covers things like the difference in our skeletal structure, the difference in our hormonal makeup, and how that may affect training. She talks about women coming back to training postpartum after having a baby, and pelvic health issues possibly that people have. I really like it because I'm taking the course. So when this podcast goes live, I will have finished it. And it's been really, really cool for me because I love to learn. I love to learn from smart people. And it's great because she really dives into the science, but she does it in these live calls, one-on-one, so that you can actually ask questions. She can answer them. And you can really kind of dive into it. So it's not just necessarily you following a bunch of technical information on your own. She makes it really accessible. It's been really, really cool. And I like to, again, the sort of context and understanding behind it. We aren't so different from men, but we are different from men. And I think that it's important to understand those differences instead of either pretending that they're not there or treating us like completely different species, right? It's just important to know what your unique physiology is, what your challenges are, what your advantages are, and how to work with them. So I loved her course. I highly recommend it. Anybody who's listening, like I said, maybe you coach women, maybe you're just trying to get better and healthier and level up in the gym yourself. It's a really, really good program. So in this podcast, we talk about that. We talk about her program. We talk about her background a little bit. We talk about some sort of common mistakes or issues that women have with training. One part that I really love is we get into some overrated exercises and what might be better, which I love because there's a lot of overrated exercises out there just because they either look sexy or stroke your ego, and maybe they're not all that effective. So that's cool. We talk about pelvic health. We talk about all that good stuff. And she has an awesome Australian accent. So all around, super fun time. Okay, I feel like I've talked enough. Thanks for sticking with me. Here is my podcast interview with the awesome Kayla Mulvogue.
All right, Kayla, we're recording. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
How are you surviving your first January in Ontario?
Oh, I mean, like...
You're getting through
tough.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. We're getting through it. I mean, like, it's been tough, of course, like, especially, I think, more so because of, like, the pandemic and everything being locking down, like gyms being locked down, because, you know, exercise is super important for mental health. But, you know, just been going for, like, 3 walks a day, rugging up. You know, going down to the water sort of reminds me of home a little bit. So, yeah, doing okay. Keeping busy with work. So,
Yeah, I mean, Ontario especially is a rough place. Like you said, we're in just different parts of the province, which is bigger than a lot of countries. So it's not like we're right next door to each other, but it's a tough place because it's a big city. Toronto is a big city with tons to do when you can do things. And so it's like, it's extra tough when you're just kind of sitting in your house and there's so many things you could be doing. But I've learned from living in a cold place for a while. You know, I grew up in Canada, but I still am not like a cold person in my veins. Like my mother's from an island. Like I prefer to be hot and sweaty all the time. But one of the things that I really like I had to switch my perspective when I moved to Ontario, which is like a different level of cold where it's like, you can't look at every winter like, let's just get through it, or else literally half of your life, you're going to be miserable. So you have to like accept it and find ways to have fun. Like I was going snowshoeing the other day, you get into skiing, like some of these like long walks or like hikes and stuff in the winter can be absolutely beautiful. But it's all about perspective. Because again, I have a brother who lives in Florida and he doesn't like the beach and he doesn't like being hot. And I'm like, come on, dude. Like I would switch places. I mean, maybe not switch places exactly, but I would like to be on the beach if I could. So it's all about perspective. Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, like I'm from Australia. So like we're surrounded by beach and sun and water. So I just sort of think, you know, like I can always go home if I wanted to. And like home's always going to be there. So, you know, I've spent probably my last 5 or more Australian summers in on the other side of the world in like cold places. Like I spent a ski season working in Japan a few years ago as a physio on the ski slopes. Like I absolutely love snowboarding. I've been to Canada. This is my third or fourth time even in Canada during the winter. So like I do like this would be my first full one, but I do tend to like love the winter sports and the snowy sports, even though I do love the sun and the beach, but I never go surfing. I only like snowboarding.
Really?
So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's weird.
I tried surfing for the first time like a year ago, but of course, I think a lot of it depends, just like skiing or snowboarding, it depends on where you go and where you learn, because where I was, it was like this very secluded, like super chill place in Costa Rica that was like, there weren't a ton of people. There wasn't any like coral reefs. The waves were just big enough that you could like learn, but they weren't so big that it was terrifying. It was like a really good, and I always tell people like I learned to ski, downhill ski when I was like 3 years old. Canadian. And I'm like, I appreciated learning at that age so much before you understand how crazy it is what you're doing. Like you're going up to the top of a mountain and just sliding down it and hoping for the best. So I feel like a lot of it is sort of like the setting and maybe the people that are around you and stuff. But if you haven't been, or if, you know, whenever you can, I highly recommend you go to Mont Tremblant in Quebec. And I will meet you there because it's pretty close to where I am. And it's a beautiful hill, and we can go snowboarding and skiing. And then you can like fix whatever ends up being wrong with me after a day of snowboarding and skiing.
Yeah. I think I may have visited that on one of my trips here. We did spend a Christmas, in Montreal. So okay. I mean, I think surfing, getting up on the board is not hard, but like paddling out is the hardest thing. Like when you go snowboarding, you sit on a chair and it takes you to the top. You don't have to hike up the top. Well, you can choose to hike up the top, but surfing is really hard.
Yeah. And there's like all the etiquette. I mean, there's etiquette with all sports, but like you go to a place that's busy and there's people who are like better than you, and you have to hope you don't run into somebody else mid wave. And it's very, there's a lot of,
it can be intimidating.
Yeah. All right. We're getting off track already, but that's fine. Before we kind of get into too many like of my questions or the questions that I sourced online when I kind of put this out that I was going to be talking to you, I really appreciate the work that you do and the free information that you put out on social media. It's awesome. I've been following you for a while, and I'm so glad that we're finally able to do this, because I think that you're going to be a really, really helpful resource to my listeners. But before we kind of dive into stuff that you specialize in and you're going to help us with today, can you just kind of give people like a bit of background on like who you are and what you do and how you got into it?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a physiotherapist from Australia. I originally started out doing exercise and sports science as my undergraduate degree. And as I was going through that, I was working as a personal trainer and a coach to sort of, get myself through uni, which kind of, the two, I guess, went hand in hand. And like going through that exercise and sports science degree, I was able to do my personal training certificate sort of a little bit more fast tracked because some of the subjects sort of overlapped. So that was really handy for me. And then, really handy as well, studying physio, learning all about the body, all about anatomy, biomechanics, all that sort of stuff. I've played tons of sports growing up. So I guess that was always sort of the direction that I knew I was going, but I didn't always know that I wanted to be a physiotherapist. And so once I finished university, I went into clinical practice, and I did 2 years clinical practice, working a lot of hands-on, but also the exercise rehab side of things as well. And, I found it really quite, working as a physio and being hands-on and, people coming to you in pain, like seeing sort of like 20 patients a day or something like that, it's quite draining on you, like physically and mentally, emotionally. So I sort of really missed the side of like the coaching side of things, where it was sort of, more performance based rather than rehab based. And I sort of noticed there was kind of like a bit of a gap between rehab and performance. And so, where I started to work was sort of in that gap and working, from rehab to performance, or as well as like including rehab in your performance training, because there are a lot of there are a lot of great coaches out there, but there are a lot that don't really know too much about what they're doing, and they can hurt their clients if they're not programming for them or monitoring their exercise execution technique effectively. So that's where I sort of went after those 2 years. I spent time working in a studio gym, but also had my own treatment clinic, so I could take them into the room if they needed some hands-on work, but also take them out into the gym and show them exercises and look at the way they squat or deadlift or whatever it was that they were having trouble with, and be able to cue them appropriately and work through progressively overloading them and getting them back into their performance things. And then from there, I went on to do more of the educational side of things. So spent more time, did a little bit of travel, worked out of a few gyms, teaching personal trainers, a little bit more about anatomy, biomechanics, and how to train effectively, and how they can, because I think coaches have the biggest impact to help people. If people get hurt, yes, they're going to come to a physio, but they can avoid that in the first place and save themselves a lot of money by training, effectively, or training intelligently. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now. Now I'm really online based. I teach more on the side of women's physiology and training. I teach an online course, and I have a couple of online clients that I work with, and some girls that I mentor as well.
That's very cool. Is there an element to, is it correct to say that you have also kind of moved more towards, I don't know if this is even a word, but like prehab, like working with people before they're hurt? That's kind of what you're saying too, right? Like it's one thing to like deal with people who are injured and messed up and try to get them back. But what about people who maybe aren't super messed up, but like when you see their movement patterns or you see their training, you're like, all right, we're one step away from a disaster here. So let's fix things before they happen.
Yeah, you can definitely pick up things, when you look at people, or when you assess their range of motion, or you assess their stability or their strength or their technique, things like that. You can definitely see where and pick up where something might go wrong if something is going to go wrong. Yeah. So yeah, there's not like injury prevention isn't necessarily a thing, but there's definitely, minimizing your risk of injury. You can sort of see where things might go wrong and how you can correct them so that they don't.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of that again goes back to movement patterns, because if you're watching somebody squat and it's a nightmare, you are preventing an injury if you can help them squat in a more efficient way, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about, and I want you to get into the course that you're doing too, because I'm going to go through it soon and I'm really excited, but the difference, like why you decided to, again, focus more on women with our unique physiology, and kind of talk about some of the key components of like why it's different, because there does seem to be a lot of conversation in like the training world about, it's like either we're two different creatures, like men are from Mars, women are from Venus, completely different, have to train completely differently, or there's kind of this dismissive like, muscle's muscle, strength is strength, it's all the same, just whatever. And I know, as with everything, we fall somewhere in the middle, right? It's never one or the other. It's never black and white. It's always somewhere in the middle. But if you could kind of get into that a little bit, so we can kind of understand maybe what some of those main differences or considerations are.
Yeah. So something I always talk about in the course is like, these are considerations for training. Like, individuals are individuals. Every woman is going to be different to the next woman, but there are certain, like, we're all human beings, but there are certain differences in terms of our physiology. The biggest one obviously being that women have a different structure to men, have a different genetic makeup to men. We also have a different physiology in terms of our hormones. So, men being predominantly testosterone dominant, and then women having low levels of testosterone and higher levels of estrogen, progesterone. Both of, like, humans, males and females, have all the hormones, just in differing levels. So that's the biggest thing. And the biggest thing, the reason for that is because we need to reproduce. Like, we need to go through the process of gestation, reproduction, and
we do all the work
birth.
Is what you're saying. Yeah. We have to do the hard stuff. Men just kind of hang out and squat. I get it.
They do their thing, and then it's like they're sweet for the next 9 months.
There you go.
Yeah, so we won't get too much into that.
That's a whole other podcast. We can,
rated. Yeah.
No, not at all. This is my podcast. We can go as weird and dirty as we want to, but I think we all know basically.
We know how it works.
Who the tougher sex is. But anyway, continue.
Yeah, so basically, our genetic makeup is different. So if I start with structure, if I start with the way we're structured is, we tend to have these wider hips because we obviously need to hold a baby. We need to have space to grow a baby inside our hips. So women tend to have wider hips and a smaller rib cage because we need more room in that abdominal cavity. So, the wider hips, what they do is it means that we have this increased angle that the thigh bones come out from our hips and go in towards our knees. So this is a consideration. This is one of the big considerations that we need to make in our training and exercise execution in terms of knee pain. Women are more susceptible to knee pain and knee injuries because of the angle that our knees come in, and because the way, the structure and the ligaments and all that are made up. So, ACL injuries are really common in women who play sports and things like that. And, a lot of knee instability issues and things like that as well. So, that's one consideration for the lower body. And then we look at exercises, for example, like squats and lunges and things like that, and how we can effectively cue women in exercises like this to make sure that they're not putting themselves at a risk of injury. In the upper body, because of this wider hip structure, we need to have what's called an increased carrying angle. So like, it's the angle that our elbow sort of leaves our forearm, and that's so when we walk, we do have our shoulders are not as broad because we have this smaller rib cage. Our shoulders aren't as broad, and therefore we need this bigger angle at our elbows so that we don't hit our hips when we're walking, when we're walking. So this is, a consideration that we need to make when we look at upper body exercises, and where our shoulder is placed and where our elbow is placed, and cueing for things like that as well. Women tend to have increased mobility, less muscle mass overall than men on our upper bodies, more lower body dominant, that body fat patterning. And this is because of the way that our hormones are. We have this monthly cycle of increasing and decreasing and crisscrossing estrogen, progesterone over the cycle. So it's been found in research that estrogen is actually it helps with, it's called anti-catabolic, so it helps with decreasing the breakdown of muscle as we exercise. So we know that, when we program for women, we can handle higher intensities at higher loads with lower rest periods. So we have increased recovery in terms of that. So looking at the way that programming is set up compared to men, there's so many. There's, we have like different muscle fiber types, which makes us better suited to more endurance type activities rather than strength or power. But we definitely, you're not going to go, if you don't enjoy running, you're not going to go and do that. So, it's just a consideration, like, in our strength training, we can lift those heavier loads for more reps, like have a better endurance in terms of that. There's so many things. I mean, all considerations, because like I said before, like every woman is different. Some women experience really bad symptoms around their cycle, some not so much. So it's like, for those that maybe do need a bit of a deload week for 1 week 1 week of the month or the training cycle, then that's fine, but others can sort of push through. So yeah, it's all just, considerations that we can make. Not necessarily, there are no completely different exercises or completely different ways to train women and men. It's all just sort of considerations that we can make to make, training more effective and be able to adhere better to our programs and not get frustrated if, say, we're not making the progress that we're sort of looking for.
I like that, because you're basically speaking to, like you said earlier, intelligent training, but also nuance, which is probably the least sexy term in the fitness and wellness world, but it's also, I think, one of the most accurate and authentic terms, in that no one prescription is going to work for everybody, and no one declaration is going to be correct for any massive group of people. So just this concept that what you just finished talking about isn't necessarily going to apply 100% to every woman every time, but these are similar to the way we talk about nutrition and we talk about things like fasting or carb cycling or whatever. That isn't a prescription, it's a tool, it's a consideration, right? It's something you can use, maybe try things out. I like that. I didn't really think, it's funny because I knew the concept of, obviously, sort of, we've got different hips and that's going to affect sort of lower body training, but I never really considered the idea that we've got this sort of smaller upper body and smaller shoulders, and the way the angles work and how that would change potentially the way we do upper body stuff, because obviously I'm more interested in upper body. So can you, because one of the things I really like about your Instagram account, you post these instead of maybe this movement, maybe try this one instead, and here's why. Can you talk about, in your experience and maybe clients you've had or people you've worked with, some of the more popular exercises among women that may not be as effective for us as we think they are? Are there any that kind of come up? Yeah.
Yeah, straight
Please.
away.
Yes.
I think the barbell hip thrust is highly overrated.
Okay.
The barbell hip thrust, okay, it's, there are situations where it is a good tool to use. Like the glutes, to build your glutes, you do need, you need load and you need power. The glute max, we have 3 glutes actually. The glute max is responsible for hip extension. So, that's the biggest muscle in the body and the one we're sort of most targeting when we want to look at the shape of the glutes. The barbell hip thrust allows you to load a lot of weight. So it allows you to, do a heavy hip thrust, a powerful movement. It is, though, a very small range of movement of the glutes. So it is, if we think about the way that it's set up, we're really only working the really shortened range of the glutes. Because once you sort of get to that very bottom part, there's, the weight isn't necessarily against gravity, and you've got this really heavy barbell on a really small bone and joint of your pelvis, which is not really meant to be weight bearing in that horizontal plane. It's meant to be weight bearing when you're upright, so when you're standing and walking and things like that. So you're not really meant to have a heavy weight, so that can put you at a greater risk of injury, first of all. Doing that hip thrust movement is just a very small range of the glutes. And we have so many more exercises that we can choose that, aren't necessarily loaded as heavy. But if you want to build a muscle, it's not necessarily load that's going to build them. It's going to be tension. And so we can use different exercises with less load, which are going to be safer, but put more tension along them. For example, if you do a step up, you can see that there's you're getting a lot more hip extension through a step up. Your knee steps up, your hip is almost 90 degrees, and then you go through that full range of motion. I think the barbell hip thrust is, a massive one that a lot of women like. It's definitely something that you can add into your program every now and then. I wouldn't do it all the time. Give yourself a break a little bit, some of the time, because it does put a lot of shear force, through the small bones of the pelvis, through the small joints of the lower back, because that barbell is going straight down against gravity and your joints are aligned differently. So like adjacent to that. So yeah, I think
it's kind of like the latest version of like, I don't want to make anybody mad here, but like the leg press machine, right? It's sort of like an ego exercise, because you can, if you have some strength, you can like throw plates and plates and plates on that thing, and it kind of makes you feel like a badass, even if it isn't the most effective. But like I've found, and I'm speaking for myself too, like we all go through these periods of growth and maturity and experience in our fitness journeys, and everybody has a period where like they just want to lift the heaviest weights possible. Cool. That's awesome. That's badass. But one thing that I've learned more recently, really, that has been extremely helpful for me, especially in times when you can't go to the gym and you don't have a bunch of plates to work with, or you don't have, the ability to lift heavy weight, is just what you said. The fact that like muscle contraction and tension is actually going to be more effective than just how much weight you can throw around. And that really, I do think that comes with some maturity, because it's very hard for people who are, and maybe you're working out with other people, and maybe you're competing, and maybe you're doing all these things where you're really trying to like one up yourself or other people, and you see what other people in the gym are doing. But being able to grow muscle and strength with less weight is actually an impressive thing, I think. And, I'll see people who are lifting way heavier weights than me, but like maybe my muscles are a little bit bigger. And I'm like, I don't know, maybe it's not exact science here. Like maybe it really is about connection and tension and all those things. So, but yeah, I think it's something almost people need to like learn on their own as they go, maybe sometimes.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like you're right, because like once you start loading, it's like, where do you have to go? If you can put more tension along your muscles, not only is it less taxing on your nervous system, so you're able to do more work, you have a longer runway of progression, like you have more room to move. And, with the heavy hip thrust, there's not been shown to be any correlation between squat and deadlift strength with having a strong hip thrust. And two, like you're not really isolating the glutes in any way. With those sorts of weights, you're going to be using your hamstrings and your quads and things like that to help as well. So it's not truly isolating the glute max or the fibers of the glute max, which is kind of what you want.
Okay. Is there another one that comes up? Because this is fun for me, is like sort of debunking like workouts that we're all doing that actually we don't really need to be doing. Is there another one you can talk to us about?
Exercises.
Is there like an upper body one that people just kind of do that's sort of useless or like not that great?
I can't think.
I've seen you do a couple really good like lat pull down, and even like maybe variations, like, I don't know. I mean, and a lot of it, again, isn't necessarily that the movement's bad. It's that people are using mostly momentum, or they're just using muscle groups that you're not actually trying to target, and all of these things.
Yeah. The thing with the lat pull down is, the overhand grip lat pull down, which you see most commonly, is, it's not truly isolating the lats. Again, like it's a back exercise, it's a whole back exercise. Not saying it's bad, it's just like, if you want to truly target and isolate the lats, you want to have your hands in an underhand position, and you want to like really think about contracting and extending the shoulder as the hand is in that underhand grip. So it's just like, it's again like a variation. Like sometimes you want to work full back strength. Like as soon as people, squeeze their shoulder blades together on a lat pull down, that's losing the lats, because the lats don't actually attach and do that movement of retraction of the shoulder blade. They do more extension of the shoulder in that sort of externally rotated shoulder position. I guess another upper body exercise, and it really depends what you're using the exercise for. Another one is like, you don't see women doing it too much, but a bench press isn't a great chest exercise, purely because, the pecs are they protract the shoulder, they adduct and they flex and internally rotate. Whereas like when you are doing a bench press, you want to keep your scapula retracted. And so you're not going through that full range of motion of the chest. it's more of a compound strength exercise again, for pure strength, but not necessarily great for targeting the pecs, which, you don't see women doing it a lot anyway because they don't necessarily want to grow their pecs. But
I'd like to see more women benching
example.
Personally, not for pec. I mean, there's nothing wrong with pecs. I like having a little bit of chest muscle, but I would love to see more women doing benched for it, like you said, because it's a compound upper body strength and power movement that we are so often. And I mean, look, I don't want anybody to do workouts that they don't want to do if they have no interest, but I think that there's still so much of this narrative of like, well, women don't really have a lot of upper body muscle. So like, just focus on your glutes. Like, just, don't worry about it. Like, who cares if you don't have any upper body strength? I'm like, I think you can have upper body strength. You just need to put some work into it, and it's fun and it's nice to have a balance and like do it all, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, you're definitely going to put on muscle mass if you train it. Like you will, like if you load up something heavy, but it's just, there are, I guess better exercises that you can use for, shoulder health and shoulder function and things like that are definitely, which are crucial for, I guess your upper body strength and upper body health, like health of your joints, for example, like your shoulder joints and, your, even your core, like you use a lot of core in your upper body work as well. So,
Cool. So one of the things you mentioned earlier about physiology is how women are the ones who get to do the fun job of carrying and birthing children, which can have sometimes a dramatic impact on your pelvic floor, your core muscles, all of these things, and tendons and ligaments and all of these things that are stretching and accommodating to make way for all of this fun. And I really wanted to talk about this a little bit because as somebody who, maybe having a child in the future, but also I know a lot of listeners are women who are maybe pregnant, maybe have children, maybe are looking to have children. And there is a lot of this kind of narrative in the fitness world of like, you might just pee a little when you work out from now on. You might just have diastasis. You might just have kind of some stuff going on down there you don't really like, but guess what? You gave birth to a miracle. So here you go. And I don't really love hearing that. Like I'd kind of prefer to be told that there are things you can do to rehab these things and improve the function and not just sort of accept lower performance of body functions for the rest of your life because you gave birth. I don't think that it has to be a sentence. So I'd love for you to kind of talk about that. Like, do you actually work with clients in the sort of like postnatal experience too? Okay.
Yeah, definitely. So, I guess the biggest thing is, during pregnancy. So like, making sure that you are creating a strong base, a strong body during pregnancy. Like research, it used to be don't exercise or stop exercising when you're pregnant, like years and years and years ago. And then there were these restrictions of like heart rate and time and temperature and things like that, which have completely changed now. It's like exercise during pregnancy is beneficial for most women who are in healthy pregnancies. Obviously, you're going to be cleared by your doctor to exercise before you start exercising while pregnant. But, for most women, and even some women who haven't been exercising before they get pregnant, starting an exercise routine is also beneficial for them to avoid complications like gestational diabetes and things like that. And, they don't call it labor for nothing. Like labor is hard. It is laborious. So you need to be strong for that. You need to have like good endurance for that. So I think, starting, before you get pregnant and, continuing exercise while you get pregnant is going to be a good thing. And, it's also been shown to, reduce the amount of diastasis after pregnancy, the ab separation that occurs in, 30 to 100% of women are going to experience that ab separation. So, it's going to be something that most women are going to experience. So, exercising 30 minutes, moderate intensity on most, if not all days of the week is what the current guidelines are. And that has been shown to, even just 3 days a week has been shown to, decrease, that diastasis or help it sort of come back together post-pregnancy as well. In terms of, pelvic floor rehab, like there are definitely structural changes that happen during pregnancy that might not necessarily go back to normal. For example, the widening of the hips, the widening of the rib cage, or the ribs might not come straight back down to what they used to be. But these are structural changes which we don't really have any control over, but we definitely have control over the functional stuff. So anything that's sort of soft tissue like muscle, we have control over. So that coming back together of the ab separation is going to be something that you want to work on quite soon after you give birth. It's not something you want to leave, because if you do leave it too long, it might not necessarily come back together. And in terms of pelvic floor, I think that's something that's, this bladder leakage or things like that is commonly accepted as something that's going to happen, but it's not something that has to. Like, it's not a normal thing. And there's definitely things, because it is soft tissue, you can train the pelvic floor, you can you strengthen the pelvic floor and, help with coordination and things like that post-pregnancy to stop these things from occurring. And, again, like, the longer you leave it, the sooner, there are definitely things, because this like, postpartum period where it's kind of like 0 to 6 weeks, there's, women are usually told there's not a lot you can really do, just rest. But there are definitely, you can start with your pelvic floor contractions, if there's no pain there, and you can start, activating the pelvic floor, because some of the nerves might get damaged. That nerve signal kind of has to come back. It takes time to come back, but you can definitely train, the nerves, from your brain to the actual muscles to start, contracting those, like sending the signals to contract the pelvic floor muscles again. But, making sure at that 6-week period, you're having your checkup, your assessment, your obstetrician gynecologist, your doctor, your women's health pelvic floor physio is doing an internal examination to check that you are able to contract the pelvic floor correctly, and not bearing down. So that's one thing that, can sort of happen. Like, you might be bearing down, you might not be doing the correct contraction, you might be thinking you are, but it's not doing the right thing. So that's something that can happen. So, making sure that you're doing the correct contraction, and it's definitely not a life sentence to, have these things occur post-pregnancy. And I see a lot of these generic pelvic floor programs that are sort of marketed to women, and it's like, these exercises are good for like lower level, like starting out. You're lying on the floor and sort of thinking about contracting the pelvic floor, or you're doing some sort of glute bridge or something like that. But what women need is they need to progress that. They need to get back to doing the things that they love, right? So, if they love running, for example, it's like they need to train the pelvic floor in a functional way that's going to relate to running, or they need to train the pelvic floor in a functional way that's going to relate to lifting weights, because, it's common. And, it's not just women who have given birth and gone through childbirth that might experience bladder leakage when lifting weights. It can be younger girls as well who are lifting really heavy weights. So, making sure that the coordination is there of the pelvic floor, and making sure that we're progressively overloading it, to these heavier weights, and, using the pelvic floor in a functional way. For example, like sneezing, coughing, jumping, for example, are some of the ways that we can train it in a functional way to get back to the activities, the daily activities that women love.
Okay, good. This makes me feel better, because I'm like, will I never be able to do double unders again? That's depressing. I don't want to do that. But so you kind of alluded to, there are a lot of very like generic kind of plans and information out there for women who are either pregnant or, post pregnancy. And I know that in an ideal world, you're going to have a pelvic PT, you're going to have somebody working directly with you so that, you know, they can address your specific kind of challenges. But are there, like, across the board, any things we, as maybe someone who is pregnant, should do or not do? Because generally what I hear when I'm kind of doing this research is don't do crunches, do Kegels. And then of course I'm hearing like, maybe not everybody should be doing Kegels all the time. Maybe sometimes the issue is that you're actually already too tight and constricted and you need to learn how to release it. So is there any, you know, that you can just sort of safely, with a caveat here that this is general high level advice, but any kind of advice there?
Yeah. So, you know, those two things that you brought up are really important. So, you know, a lot of people do focus purely on the contraction part of things and they forget about the relaxation. And that can also be something that, you know, might cause some sort of dysfunction with the pelvic floor if you're continually contracting it and it's continuously tightening the pelvic floor. You know, you can cause, you know, some issues there as well. So that's what I was talking about kind of with this this functional technique that I was talking about. It's called, the name of it's called the knack. And basically what you do is you contract, you do the functional task, whether it's like a lift, cough, sneeze, run, jump, whatever it is, and then you relax. So that's like the full, it's basically a full repetition, right? Like when you're doing a bicep, you don't curl it up and leave it there. You curl it back down. So you've got to contract, and then you've also got to do, you know, the relaxation part of it as well. So, you know, when you're doing your Kegels, contracting and then also relaxing. As well, when you talked about, you know, don't do crunches and things like that, the research, so, you know, previously it was don't do crunches, do your transverse abdominis activations, which is like your sucking in activations where you like pull your belly button into your spine pretty much. And so the research showed, you know, I'm not sure if you guys know, but there was, you know, quite a well-known fitness, I'm going to say influencer, like Michelle Bridges. She was like one of the first ones. She was on the Biggest Loser and things like that. She got pregnant. She was doing crunches and she was given so much shit for it because, you know, they're like, you shouldn't do that when you're pregnant. Anyway, there was this research that came out that actually compared the transverse abdominis, like the sucking in versus a crunch, on the diastasis recti. So like the abdominal separation. They measured it like when women were pregnant, they measured it, you know, 6 months postpartum, and then they measured it, I think, something like 12, 14 weeks postpartum as well. And they found that actually drawing in, doing the TA activation actually increased the distance of the two muscles. So it actually pulled the abs apart even more, and the crunch actually brought them back together. Yeah. And so, you know, then it was sort of said, okay, like do your crunches, don't do your TA. But even further to that, I think there's only, so research is coming out like all the time, like same thing with like the you know, the guidelines for exercise during pregnancy, that is constantly been evolving. And, you know, we're still kind of stuck. Maybe like the most recent research I think came out 2015, so 5 or 6 years ago now. And still people think, oh, don't get your heart rate over 140 and don't increase your core body temperature more than 38 degrees. So it takes a long time for the newest research to actually become common knowledge. And a lot of GPs are very conservative still because that's when they went through their training. They went through their training 20 years ago and they're not up to date with the latest research. So with this crunch versus TA research, the most recent research I think was 2018. And what they did is they compared, because it's not just about closing the gap between the two muscles, between the two rectus abdominis muscles, or like your six-pack muscles. We have this this connective tissue in between the abs. It's called the linea alba, and basically it's really important for transferring forces from one side of the abs to the other and across the midline. And so what they found is when you actually did a crunch and you brought together the two muscles, they found that this linea alba distorted quite a lot. So it gave this appearance of either sagging or doming in the stomach. And I think, with the with the DRAM, I'm going to call it the diastasis recti, it's more so an issue of aesthetics for most women. It doesn't really have much of a connection with function. So there's not much like pain, like it's not related to back pain or anything like that. And so it's more a thing of looks for women. They don't like the look of it. So they found that, when you did your crunch, it brought it together, but then this linea alba started to distort. And they found that when you actually did a transverse abdominis activation and then crunched up, that put most of the tension along the linea alba. So it actually tensed the linea alba. There was no decrease in the gap, but there was no doming or sagging of it. And it sort of was, I guess, a better conclusion to come to in terms of training, both the function and the aesthetics of the core and of the rectus abdominis when you're doing your abdominal separation rehab.
Okay. So both can be good or bad depending on when and how you do it. But also maybe the conclusion here is like, get a professional to help you, because this is complicated. And it is something that I think should be included in like basic pre-postnatal care, right? Because it will have a significant impact potentially on your just everyday functioning, and at the very least on how you feel about yourself and your ability to get back into the gym and feel good and do the things you want to do. And like you said, it's one of those things that you don't really want to like leave and wait, and then like 2-3 years later, you're kind of still miserable and don't know what to do. It's like, these are things that we should be addressing relatively quickly. Can clients who are pregnant or just had a baby work with you on this stuff specifically?
So I do require people to have their assessment like in person. Like you definitely need an in-person assessment, but if they've been cleared for that, if there's no sort of, anything that's a prolapse or anything that sort of requires that attention, like if they're fine, they've had their pelvic floor checked, they've had their abdominal separation checked, and the doctor is happy for them to start to exercise, I definitely help people get back into their exercise routine safely. But if there is, like, I have had people reach out and we're like, let's just jump on a call and talk about this. For example, if the ab separation is really bad, like more than 3 fingers or something like that, or if there is a level 3 or 4 prolapse, meaning that it's sort of coming outside the body, then that's when like definitely see someone in person is probably the best thing to do, because you do need to have that hands-on and like proper attention, like in person.
Okay. All right, tell us about your course.
Okay, so the Applied Women's Physiology and Training 8-week online course includes 8 weeks of 1-hour weekly live lectures. We also have an interactive workshop each week where everyone, because the hour lecture is just like me basically just talking like I've done most of this podcast.
We love it.
And so when we get into the interactive Q&A, that's when people can ask questions from the week, or we discuss a case study or something like that. So basically we have, we focus on, it's basically an introductory course into everything women's physiology and training. So week 1 goes through, anatomy, physiology, biomechanics. We go through training and programming for women. We go through the menstrual cycle, nutrition and dieting, the pregnancy stuff, training during pregnancy, postpartum and pelvic floor rehab. We go through some common conditions that women experience, things like PCOS, endometriosis, stress, mental health, eating disorders and things like that. And then also like training throughout the lifespan. So training, if you train young adults or like young women, things like the female athlete triad and Redd's syndrome are really common. And then, looking at things like training during breastfeeding and menopause and into older age as well, and how exercise and training is just super important across all areas of the lifespan.
There's always something exciting for women to be contending with their health, right? Like, isn't it just, it's like dudes have like puberty and then I guess sort of older age, which comes with some of it, you know, hormonal issues, but it's like every decade we have something fun to work around, right? It's like always something exciting.
It's a roller coaster ride, just like our hormones. But,
oh my goodness. Yeah. So is this course then, would you say it's appropriate for like the average person who just wants to learn more about their health, as well as trainers or other coaches who are working with women?
Yeah, so the majority of people that do take the course are coaches, and they take it to sort of, you know, help their female clients. It can be males or females that can take the course, but I do still have, you know, women who just generally want to learn more about, you know, their own training and, you know, training in the gym, training through different periods of their life. Maybe they are pregnant or they're thinking about getting pregnant and they want to know more about that. It can help women just in general. Or like, I don't talk about, you know, I don't say too many terms that are, you know,
it's not like super technical.
Yeah, I try to keep it quite layman's terms. Like, I will use some anatomical terms, but they're easily, you know, Googled or researched, and I do try to say what they are. Like, for example, in the podcast, I was saying, you know, your thigh or your upper arm, your humerus sort of thing. So yeah, I do try to keep it, you know, quite relevant for all women. And, you know, especially for coaches as well. And, you know, some clinicians and students who might want to jump on the course as well.
Cool. And you were saying too that you do like different intakes. So it's not like, you know, it's not live. It's always like the calls are always with you really talking, and people can sign up for different, like if you can't make the next intake, you can do the next one. Like you're doing it every 8 weeks basically, or?
Yeah, pretty much. So our first one for 2021 is starting next week. So we're recording this in January. But the one after that will be again in mid-March, early April, I would say, will be when the next intake of AWPT is. So yeah, it's me teaching live, just yelling into a computer screen for an hour a week.
Hey, you're speaking to the choir here. Like, that's exactly what I do. It's a bit weird at first, but you know, then you get used to it. That's really exciting. I'm super pumped to be a part of this next intake, because I think I know I'm going to learn a lot, and I think it's cool that anybody who wants to learn more about women's physiology can take it. I don't know if you've had a lot of experience with men taking the course who do work with women, but I mean, that makes so much sense. And I hope that they, you know, would feel like that's valuable to them, because I've even gone so far as to say, and this might not be super like PC, but in the past, I don't always recommend women have male coaches for that exact reason. And, you know, I've never gone out of my way. Like, I go out of my way to find women coaches, female coaches, because at the end of the day, they just are going to understand your body and how it works better than a man. Unless, of course, you know, there's more encouragement to take courses like this and to really get it, because I think that it's, you're doing yourself and your clients a disservice if you aren't paying attention to the differences in our physiology. And it goes back to the beginning to, we don't have to treat each other like different creatures. We're not different creatures, but we do have different aspects of our hormones and how our bodies work. And I think we should respect that and work with it, you know?
Yeah, no, I absolutely love the guys who jump on the course. I've had probably maybe 20 take it in the 2 intakes that I've had it so far. And, you know, I love how open-minded they are and how they, you know, are willing to learn about this, and they want to experience they want to understand their female clients better. And I think it's going to put them in a better place with their female clients as well. And as well as, you know, sort of being able to gain the trust and know how to deal if certain things come up with women, and know how to, you know, talk to them comfortably about these things as well, and not sort of shy away from it, because it is like it's a natural thing. Like it is, you know, it's not something that needs to be, I guess, thrown under the doorstep. And sort of like forgotten about or not talked about. So yeah, I absolutely appreciate all the male coaches that come on, and they're all so open-minded and understand, and they love it because they haven't experienced it themselves, right? Like when we talk about, you know, experience and you know, you can have the research, you can have all the research and read everything. You know, you need that experience, and you need to take, you know, your individual client into consideration. So, you know, that's the best practice. That's going to be the best practice for their clients. And, you know, majority of the, you know, fitness industry is going to be women searching for trainers, right? And, you know, there might not necessarily, and, you know, male coaches probably dominate the space as well. So it's like there's this disproportionate, you know, female coach to the amount of female clients, right? So it's like, you know, some of them are going to have to go to male coaches, and, you know, male coaches are great, and, you know, if they know this stuff, like even better, to be able to work with them, because, you know, there is such a massive opportunity out there. It is a massive market for female personal training.
Yep. That's a very good point. And, you know, with courses like this, you are not only increasing the female coaches that are coming out armed with all this knowledge, which is great, but the men too, which makes, and, you know, you bring up a good point too about sometimes just there being sort of a discomfort where it's not even necessarily the male coach being uninformed or not taking it seriously, but there can be some discomfort or potential awkwardness about speaking about what people consider like intimate lady things when you have a professional relationship. And I think that more education and demystifying these things is going to get rid of that awkwardness, because it shouldn't be there. Like you said, obviously we all have to create sort of our guidelines around what's appropriate and how to communicate with clients and have that professional relationship. But when we're talking about how our bodies work, that's not something that should be like whispered and giggled about. It's like, here's the reality, like, let's work with it, you know? So that's really cool. It's very important. Thank you so much for coming on and giving us so much information. This has been amazing.
Thank you so much for having me. I love talking about this stuff. So
yeah, we'll have to do it again. Fun. Maybe once I go through the course, I make it through the course and learn all kinds of crazy things about women's bodies. Maybe I can have you back on and we can talk some more about it.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah. So where can folks find out more about the course, follow you, like connect with you, all that good stuff?
Yeah, so I mean, this day and age, probably best place is Instagram. So at Kayla Lee Physio. My website where all the information for the course is on is kaylaleephysio.com. And yeah, that's about it. I'm on Facebook. For anyone who's sort of goes through the course, they can join my Facebook group, and we sort of have some group discussions in there as well.
Cool. All right, Kayla, I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Go enjoy the frigid, beautiful majesty that is Ontario. And I'll see you when the course starts next week.
Yeah, see ya.
All right, folks, that's a wrap. Thank you so much for joining me. As always, thank you, Kayla, for joining me on the show to teach us and educate us. Highly recommend you check her out, give her a follow on Instagram, and think about taking this course. If you're a man or a woman, anybody can take it. A coach, just a person trying to level up in the gym, somebody trying to work out some kinks in their training, you know, you'll learn a lot. And that's what I'm all about here on this podcast. So go check her out. Thank you, of course, to our show sponsor, Bioptimizers. They are the experts in all things gut health. I rely on them quite heavily, as well as, of course, just being healthy and eating properly and having good lifestyle habits. But I use their products religiously, especially these days. I've been really crushing their magnesium product to help me get to sleep, to keep things regular, keep things calm and chill, smooth sailing. Most of us are not getting enough magnesium in our diet, so sometimes you got to supplement. Use the code MuscleMaven for 10% off. Link is in the show notes. Those guys are awesome. Go check them out. That's it for me today, guys. I hope you have an amazing week. Join me again next Tuesday. I'll see you then.